Hey folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thank you for tuning in as always. Hope you're having a good day wherever you are, whatever you happen to be doing. If you are at work, man, I hope things are going well. You have some great ideas, and if your boss doesn't appreciate you, just know that someone does. And thank you guys again for tuning in. On the show today, comedian and host of the Manwhore podcast, Billy Procida. Billy's someone, again, like a lot of people, I'm sure you hear me tell this too on the show, someone I know, but not someone I really know. So I was curious to sit down and talk with him because his podcast, the Manwhore podcast, it does some pretty decent bit of business, and he produces live events, and I was curious to kind of talk to him about some of the more business aspects of running a podcast as well as the content of his show, which I found really interesting. Like when we were talking about it, because he has an almost entirely different approach to podcasting and interviewing guests than what I do, which is part in the nature of the show, because I feel like I do this podcast to learn more about people, and then I learned something about myself, whereas Billy's kind of set out to learn about himself from romantic partners. That might not even be the right way to phrase that. If you listen to the interview, he probably phrases it much more eloquently than I do. But it was really nice to sit down and talk with Billy, again, a guy that I hadn't seen in a while, who's doing cool things. So you can find the Manwhore podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts. If you're listening to this podcast, you can find it on the same platform. So if you guys enjoy this and want to check out his show, feel free to let him know that Will Carey sent you. And if you enjoy my show and want to help other people find out about it who you think are cool, we're on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher, and you can add us to your favorite playlist at Stitcher. And I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at AwesomeDPod, which I feel for this show is kind of the perfect Twitter handle. I worried about that AwesomeDPod might be too sexual at a glance for what I usually do on this show. But it's, I think, kind of catchy, and for talking to the host of the Manwhore podcast, I thought it's pretty appropriate. So, if you guys like this and like it enough to share it with other people, I really appreciate that. Thank you. So, thank you guys again for listening, and you can also support the Manwhore podcast on Patreon. We talk a little bit about more business monetization stuff, as well as some kinky fun sex stuff and hand jobs from porn stars, which is again not in my wheelhouse at all, so that was kind of fun to hear Billy talk about. And also we ended up it turns out that we had a lot in common talking about our early childhood. So thank you guys again for being here, and let's go to my chat with Billy Procida. And maybe this is a good way to start, because like your podcast is pretty successful from what I've seen, because I've looked at your numbers.
Stitcher?
Yeah. And
am I doing good on Stitcher? I never looked.
You're doing pretty good. So the reason I like doing this, and for the longest time I was so worried about starting a podcast because I didn't want to just feel like I was imitating Marin. And then I realized even if I'm just like talking to other comedians about life and comedy, it's not going to be the same because I'm not him. Do you find that you have like more connected conversations with people on mic than you do in your regular life? Because I feel that.
I mean, I just don't think as many people want to talk to me in my regular life.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got the people who are close to me, but it's not like I'm off chatting away. Yeah. No, I have connected conversations. I think anytime I have the bandwidth for it and I'm interested in having one.
Sure.
So if I'm on mic, I'm almost always interested in connecting. But if I'm also like at a craps table at 4 a.m. in Atlantic City, which I'm not allowed to be in anymore, I also am interested in connecting sometimes. And then I'll end up talking to somebody. I don't know, I've just always had this ability to connect with people one-on-one.
Yeah, I found that if I just can offer a little bit of myself to someone that's kind of disarming, like as far as like being vulnerable, because I feel like most comics are a pretty open book about a lot of things, so you just do that little bit of like, I'm going to give you a flower of myself, and then you will give me a flower back, like in Frankenstein almost.
I think if you just open the door for someone to be able to share about themselves, people who have very interesting things to share or desperate things to share, they just will. Even if you don't open that door, there are people at a bus stop who will just be like, I need to tell you my life story. And I'm like, my headphones are in. What did you say? Like, I just find that people want to share a lot.
Well, I'm picturing being in Atlantic City because I've been there, and just sitting at a slot machine, and then like someone next to me is like, 87's where it all went wrong, honey.
Well, you would never find me at a slot machine because that is for children.
I know. I don't know how to gamble. That's all I know how to do.
I mean, you don't need to know how to gamble to lose money. You just got to put your chips on a thing, and eventually a guy in a uniform will take it from you.
Good to know. Good to know. So Billy, you are in this category of comedians that, like a lot of people that I tell is on the show, is like, I know you, but I don't think I really know you. Like I used to see you on the subway a lot because I think we used to have a similar commute to work at one point in our lives.
Okay.
So I used to see you on the 6 train a lot. And then I didn't see you for a while, and then you became this very successful podcast host.
Let's hold off on the very, but thank you.
I'm most of this show is me. It's the Will Carey friendship hour.
Okay.
So I kind of want to trace that, but again, I don't know much about who you are. So I'm curious, like, where did you grow up?
North Jersey.
North Jersey.
North Jersey, and then I went to boarding school in Connecticut for 4 years, and then I came to the city. College and never left.
Okay. So North Jersey, because I know like North and South is like is talked about as like being very different from each other. What's North Jersey?
I mean, I'm in like as North Jersey, like I'm more North Jersey than people who say they're in North Jersey. I'm in Bergen County. I grew up like, I don't know, smack between the GW Bridge and the Tappan Zee Bridge. So it's a very affluent area of New Jersey. It's very close to some very rich zip codes. I'm not a fan of the culture from where I'm from, but it's kind of like hoity-toity. We make a good chunk of money. Kids go to private school. We have very good public schools, shit like that.
Yeah.
A lot of parents who work in New York.
Sure. Yeah. Where I grew up in like very rural Southern Maryland is like technically considered like a suburb of DC. Really good public schools, but not a ton going on. It's the kind of place where like all of the pop punk bands are like, oh, I'm going to get out of this town, but I'm not oppressed whatsoever.
Right. I mean, give you an idea, like my sister went to like a Super Sweet 16 that was actually on this show, my Super Sweet 16.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like that's just the type of environment I grew up in.
So very well off, but like, did you feel like out of place there?
If your family only made $100,000 a year, you lived on Skid Row. Like that give you the idea.
Gotcha.
I never fit in, but that's just because I was just a weird, socially awkward kid. So like, the money part wasn't the issue. The issue was just like I didn't know how to talk to humans.
I didn't get much practice talking to humans early on. I was like, I felt, and I don't know how this is with you, but I didn't interact too much with people. Like I was an only child. So
you're like a loner?
Kinda, yeah. That's why I feel like my mind is so like, I was geared to being alone in New York City and being a comedian, and like I was single for so many years and it didn't bother me really.
I could have been cool with the being alone part, but I was in sports all the time because I was not bad at sports. I was not great at all sports, but I was a starter in football every season. So that forced me to be around kids, but those kids hate me, so they'd be like, "You suck." I'll be like, "You're on the bench," and they were like, "We don't care. You're still gay or something." I'll be like, okay, I don't know.
That is such a New Jersey conversation.
Yeah, it's just
it's like you suck. No, you suck. Well, you're still gay.
I'm like, fine. Still, I didn't know it was still. I'm 11, but okay.
Sure. So you're like the outcast on the football team.
I've been an outcast just in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether it's like amongst my peers, amongst kids my age, amongst my family, wherever I am, I tend to be an outcast. I'm very unlikable, I am told.
Really?
Yeah, it's a very specific type of unlikable. It's like a lot of people like me, but each of them thinks they're the only one who does. Like, ask anyone, they'll be like, Procida, he's a good guy. I don't know why everyone hates him. That's the type
Sure.
I get.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I definitely feel like if we were like in like middle school growing up, I would know who you were.
That's the other lonely kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. He takes the northwest corner of the cafeteria. I sulk in the southwest corner of the cafeteria.
Yes, but
we
I
would have been lonely kids on our own there.
100%. But I was like, okay, I could maybe talk to him about one or two things that only we're into at the pop culture wise, and then we're just going to go be alone for the rest of the time.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of my experience. Like kids again would be. There were a lot of kids who were individually nice to me, but as soon as they got into groups, like, well, Billy's a faggot, so let's do that.
Right.
Let's beat him up. Let's say mean things. Let's not invite him to whatever thing.
My biggest thing was like all the bullies in school because I was tall. I was like, oh, let's.
Yeah, you should have. Have you always been big? Because you shouldn't have gotten bullied. Like you didn't have to. It's like when there's a comic who I don't want to name, but I will say that I think it was Alexis who came up to me and said once he saw this comic who would always bully me back when I was like in my early 20s and in college and whatnot. People would see him bully me at New York Comedy Club often. And then one guy, like Alexis, came up to me and was like, you could end him, right? Because he was such a small dude and I was so much bigger. But like,
right.
Did you also not understand your strength with your size?
I just knew. Well, here's the thing for me was I knew if I fought, I'd get in. If I fought, I'd get suspended. I'd get in trouble. So I never was trying to do that.
Rules.
Even though like my dad gave me carte blanche. If someone is messing with you, you fight them. But
my grandmother gave me that carte blanche, and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, and also the thing with me is, and most people know me as pretty chill. I think, and most people would say I'm a pretty nice guy. And it takes a lot to like bring me to my boiling point. But once the switch flips, there's no like low and there's nothing in between. It's just really chill or pure madman. So I am aware of that. So I try to like always execute positive, non-violent energy. If that makes sense. The one time in middle school that I actually fought back, it ended it pretty quickly. This kid who had been my friend, and then again, like something just happened in 7th grade where I became the target of all the bullying. And as we're going into the locker room after gym class, he pushes me from behind, and I was just fed up one day, and I pushed him back, and he tried to hit me, but because my arms are longer, I pinned him up against the wall, and I didn't even like punch him hard. I just basically made a fist and moved it across his cheek, and then walked away. And then he tried to like fuck with me later, but I just ignored him.
I got into a fight my sophomore year of high school in the dorms, and this kid, just one of the many people who gave me shit all the time, I finally fought back, and then we got in this big fight. The fight actually only ended because I was on top of him and he was punching up at me, and I actually ended up getting stitches over my eye because he punched in the same spot. I started splurting blood. And he, at one point in the fight, he took his shirt off because he thought that was going to be like cool. Like it was very unnecessary, but he just like took it off. He's like, and
sure.
And then so my blood's going all over his bare chest, and he freaked out. And he hopped off the bed and was like, get it off me, get it off me. And that's how the fight ended. And I like to think that should mean I won, but I'm the one who needed to get stitches. And he got in trouble. And this is how much I got picked on. The fact that we were like, good job, Procida. Like, because they were like, no, you're not gonna be in trouble. You needed to fight. He shouldn't have been fighting at all. Yeah, that's a fond memory.
Yeah, there was a kid who gave me a black eye in 6th grade. He, and I knew it was serious, and I was so timid that it happened in first period in science class. And I walked up to my science teacher who was talking to my math teacher, and she saw me and looked horrified. And then I told them what happened, and he gets sent to the office. And I knew it was serious because my female math teacher went into the boys' bathroom with me to like help me with my bloody nose. And the only and this might be revisionist history, but I swear I looked him up, and he ended up having to go into like the armed services later on in life. And another friend of mine from kindergarten, I found out that he's her sister's like ex-husband.
Okay. How many people are listening being like, oh man, these fucking nerds over here talking about them getting bullied?
There's probably
Nerds for life.
there's probably a bunch of dudes in Jersey who's like, I want to punch him.
Yep.
Because so now if you're being bullied as a kid, and I don't know if this was the same for you, I definitely had to find some things to cling on to that I enjoyed just to get me through the day. Mm-hmm. So what were those things for you? Did you have those?
When I was like 11, 12, I started going to the pizza shop like down the block from my school after school every day. I would spend like 2, 3, 4 hours there. I would like eat some slices, read the paper. I would talk to the adult. I always connected with adults better. Uh-huh. So everyone was always like, oh, you're mature for your age. And then at some point I've passed that because now I'm not mature for my age. But at some point in my life, I was very mature for my age.
Right.
So I could only talk to people over 30. Uh-huh. And then, I would just go like have pizza. I'd talk to people, and then I would go home. There was always the promise that I was not going to have to deal with those kids again. Because so many adults would tell me like, oh, it gets better when you get to high school. But then I got to high school and it was terrible. They're like, oh, it'll get better when you get to college. Then I got to college and I was like, oh, it's much better. It's fine.
Yeah.
I just had to endure, a good 13 years of horseshit to be free of it. But,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So for me, it was always the future. It was always knowing like I just got to endure. But it's fucking hard.
Yeah, man. But oh my gosh, once I hit like 7th grade was really bad, but then 8th grade was a little bit better, and then high school was actually, once I found the theater department and my other misfits, it was such a relief.
So it sounds like you had like 4 years of rough times. So
not too. That's not too far. Not too far off.
Yeah, come on, settle down. Everyone needs to go through 4 years of shit here and there.
Yeah. Well, it definitely, it keeps you humble. It's the early signs of life kicking you around a little bit. You're definitely not gonna be an asshole later. Later on
I'm arguably a major asshole now. I think if anything, it's helped that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's all that fucking energy absorbed and now getting back out. It would be a type of thing where like when kids would try to bully me, on the rare cases I would try to insult them back, I would insult them too well, and then all of a sudden I was the jerk. And it was just like, don't be mad at me. And then they like beat me up or call the teacher. I'd be like, but he said this. And they were like, yeah, but what you said was worse. I was like, I shouldn't be in trouble because I'm better at this than I'm better at bullying than the bullies. I just didn't do it. And don't punish me just because I defended myself with words better than they could dish it. I don't know. I don't think it precludes you from being an asshole later in life, although it does, it did teach me empathy like a motherfucker, I think. But
yeah, which is also
gave me a healthy resentment of like other men.
Well, I mean, for what you're doing now, that might not be a terrible thing to bring to your podcast, right?
At least I acknowledge that I look like the enemy, but I don't know.
Sure.
I'll put it this way: it's I think a lot of people interpret me and my show as like a bro show if they don't know it, because I look apart and it says Manwhore and it's talking about sex, so then they're like, oh, it's probably some bro bragging about banging chicks, and it's like, it's not that show, because those dudes you don't like, I also don't like, because I never fit in with them,
right?
Yeah.
So you're like you're the podcaster for the misfits, as you are one of them. Misfits,
I mean, just any sex positive weirdo who this wants to be able to like talk or listen to fun sex stuff that they maybe feel shameful about. A common piece of feedback I get is from women who they feel hopeful hearing me talk because they're like, oh, he's not the worst like most of the men I dated, so maybe there are other men like him out there. Like they'll hear me talk and be like, oh, maybe there are other dudes who are straight who talk like this guy too.
That's a good bit of hope to give women, I think.
Yeah, if that's what they took from my, slutty tales, fine. That's fine by me.
Sure. So, okay, so you're bullied as a kid. So you weren't like finding refuge in comedy early on, or
yeah, I was a comedy nerd since probably 6th, 7th grade. Got really into Carlin and Chris Rock. I think my first album was Bigger and Blacker, so I had that memorized.
Great album.
Yeah, it's a really good album. I had it memorized. I said all the words, even the words that I don't say as often today.
Right.
Got into Dane Cook. A lot of people. Yeah, I was a big comedy nerd as a kid. Louis Black. I was like a 7th grader listening to a lot of Louis Black.
I loved Louis Black when I discovered him. I think I first heard him on some kind of like theater trip, and someone was playing the White Album. So it was like, him yelling about weather and all
great
those
album.
and all those bits. Oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah, End of the Universe is great. The Starbucks across from a Starbucks. Yeah.
I thought, oh man, that reminds me. I saw in Manhattan today, I saw a Starbucks next to a Dunkin' Donuts. It's like turf war coffee wise. So you're a comedy nerd early on, and how old are you? If you don't
29.
29. Okay, so I'm a few years older than you. So I guess maybe if I was in college, maybe you're in high school. So you're a comedy nerd early on, and did you think you were going to be a comedian as you're listening to that stuff, or did that come later?
Nah. Halfway through high school, I thought I wanted to open up a comedy club in New York City. I originally wanted to be a lawyer, and then when I saw Legally Blonde 2, and that talked me out of it. And then from there, I was like, well, what do I want? I was like, it'd be cool to own a comedy club like in New York City. Yeah. Because I was like, I'm not funny, but like I want to facilitate that, and I get to see a bunch of great comedy. And then during college, I would tell people, they were like, oh, what are you trying to do with your major? We're 18. Let's decide futures now. And then I'd say, oh, I want to open up a comedy club. And people would think I meant that I wanted to do comedy. I was like, oh, no, I'm not funny. But then they would say, no, you should try it. You're funny. And sophomore year, I did like a talent show in my dorm at NYU. My first joke crushed. And then I kind of like got hooked. From there, I just started doing open mics, and then eventually started doing shows.
And how old were you when that happened?
19.
19. And you said you went to boarding school in Connecticut? What was that like?
I went to like an alternative education boarding school. It was like a character development place. So just a lot of seminaring, talking about your feelings, stuff like that.
Why did you end up going there?
Because I was very socially awkward. I didn't love myself and all that jazz. So if I had gone to my local public high school, I don't know if I survived 4 years there.
No, totally.
It's shock. I mean, I think a lot of people were shocked that I survived 9 years at my K through 8 school without killing myself or anyone else. I found out I was on a red flag list. Like as I was approaching 8th grade graduation, I found out that after Columbine, which had been a couple years prior, they made a list of like, well, who could shoot up? Like, who gets shit on so much they might shoot up a school? And so apparently my name was on that list just because of the sheer volume of bullying I faced every fucking day. But I wasn't a violent kid, so.
But they looked at Columbine and were like, okay, these are the signs.
Right.
Who do we have at the school that fits that?
And instead of fixing the bullying problem, they were just like, we'll just keep an eye on Procida.
Well, that is educational bureaucracy in action at its finest.
Yeah.
So they ship you to Connecticut.
I wanted to go to boarding school because I just didn't want to go to the local place. So I was looking at boarding schools, but my mom insisted I go on this one because it had like this character component and there was a family education aspect to it with like seminaring, family weekends, stuff like that. So my mom insisted I go there, and after the first year, it's not a fun place, but I recognized at 14 I was like, this is where I need to be. Because this is the place where I'm going to like grow and like maybe love myself one day.
Yeah. That is a really mature thought to have at 14.
Yeah. Having mature thoughts as a kid is not fun. Let me tell you that. It would have been more fun if I left.
Right. I'm just imagining all those years of like reading the paper and eating pizza.
Yeah.
You have that. I think at 14, I was just angry at the world and listening to new metal. That's about where I was at.
I think it was 2005 or 2006. I was like angrily keeping track of the West Side like rail sports comp. There was a plan to build a Jet Stadium on the West Side Highway as a overall bid for New York City to get the 2012 Olympics. and I was like I'm a big Jets fan, so like
Yeah.
at 15, 16, I was like reading the papers, because we didn't have smartphones then, so I'm like reading the paper every day, keeping track of like, oh man, is Silver gonna vote in our favor on that 3-panel New York City council board or whatever. Like I was keeping track of that shit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was weird. I was a weird kid.
Oh, that's funny. That's the one thing I have about New York sports though, is that's so I'm one of those assholes who's like, well, the only football team in New York City is the Bills, and I'm a big like soccer fan, and I'm like, I'm going to be watching NYCFC at Yankee Stadium probably for a long time, because it just every time I think a plan for a stadium is going to get approved, nah.
Yeah, but I don't think teenagers are typically reading the paper about like city council votes for a city they don't live in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I can imagine you're like, did you guys watch New York 1 last night? Oh my gosh.
I listen to 1010 Wins News I listened to the news from like about first grade, I think, until I was around 12 or 13. Every night I would go to bed listening to 1010 Wins News because I was terrified that there might be a tornado in New Jersey. Because my first grade teacher, Mrs. Gunla, she told us a story about the last time a tornado touched down in New Jersey, which I guess was like decades and decades prior. And so I got so terrified that every night I went to bed with that, because I just wanted to know. I wanted to be the first to know, like, is there going to be a tornado? I want to be ready. I want to get the fuck out of here. So I didn't go to bed like listening to fun tunes. I was like listening to the news.
Right.
In terror.
This is you ever like talk to someone and then you find out something about them and you're like, oh, that explains a lot. I feel like I'm having that right now in this conversation, but I'm loving it. The same way, like if I ever needed to explain my personality, I just say, oh, I grew up 20 minutes from a nuclear power plant.
Okay.
If anything ever went wrong, I would have been turned to dust. Living next to impending disaster. Okay, so you go to boarding school in Connecticut, and you come back and you went to NYU?
Yeah.
What was your major?
Media and communications, but I was doing stand-up. I started my sophomore year, so I was ducking out of classes early so I could go sign up for open mics and shit. So.
And this is like early 2000s?
I started October 26th, 2008.
2008. Okay, so that's a couple years before I moved here. Yeah. And where were you going? Like New York Comedy Club and
I mean, there weren't. That's the thing. That's so the present day open mic scene is so interesting for being not interesting, because it's an open mic scene. I'll put this way: just more the options that are out there. Like, if only they knew. There used to be like, if you hustled hard, you could do 3 mics in a day, but Mike Lawrence and Suba could do 4, because like people will put them in the right spots. Like you could do Laugh Lounge at 5, you do like Eastville at 6, then you get to choose from a number of other options at 8, and that was really it. A couple nights a week, the Pit had an 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right. Michelle Wolf used to host one of them.
Yes, I remember that.
Tuesday night open mic. Yeah, that was Michelle Wolf's mic.
Yep, I remember going to Michelle Wolf's mic.
So, like, you basically did 2 mics in a day, sometimes 3, and like 4 if you did it all right. But there weren't like all these options. Like the Creek wasn't there with 2 or 3 mics a day. You didn't have all these mics all over the city. You really just had these few. So I was really just going to Eastville a lot because it was right there.
Yeah.
But you had to like... I mean, I talked to some comics about it. It's like we sometimes had to sit on the stoop at 3 o'clock to wait to sign up for the 6 o'clock, because they wouldn't let us start our own list, but people would just like camp out every day just to do 5 minutes that they paid $5 to do. It was insanity.
I kind of remember those days when I.
It's all before the Creek started doing their mics.
The like multiple mics a day.
Yeah, because then once the Creek started up like being a place, then people would, instead of doing Eastville, they would go up and go over to the Creek instead.
Yeah, and now I feel like there's at least 2 mics during the weekdays at the Creek. I haven't been there recently, but. Yeah,
I'm saying so like you can do 5-6 mics in a day, where like there weren't even 6 mics total in a day when I started.
Yeah. I remember when it was like 2011, I used to work at Starbucks. I would usually most days I would work from like 6 a.m. to like maybe get off at like 2 or 11 depending on the day. I would go up to the upper west side, sleep in the park. That was sleep in Central Park.
Oh, don't do that.
And
Don't do
then
that.
sign up for the 5 o'clock. And then usually I would like sometimes hop down to Broadway, sometimes zoom over to the Creek.
Lots of local references, everybody. Get out your Googles.
Yeah.
Start plotting. Start getting that Google Maps out. Start plotting points.
Yeah, Bats Lava, the podcast.
Oh, God. Bad Slava, the podcast. That's so depressing. I slept in a park once because I was like semi-homeless for a night. The summer, I think before my senior, the summer after my senior year of college, where I was dealing at a poker club, and that club like got shut down. But my boss, Scotty Cards, don't know his real last. Well, now I know his last name, but for years I did not know his real name.
That's a great card name.
His name is Scotty Cards, and he like rented some like random place on the in Little Italy where he was going to try to throw a game together to make some cash, and I was going to sleep there. But then one of the nights he was like, "No, I want to be able. I want the place with my girl, but I also didn't have a place to go." So and it was only for one night, so I just stayed up really late and then slept in Washington Square Park. So I stayed up to like I think I got to like 4 a.m. before I finally like laid down on a bench and hoped I didn't die.
Yeah. Well, I would like kind of like nod in and out because I was like, I don't want to fall asleep in a public park. I must have looked like I was on heroin.
See, the people were telling me to be careful because someone might just come up to me and stick me with heroin, which like I don't do heroin. I don't want to do heroin, but like that's kind of nice. That would be a nice thing to do, to just go give a stranger some of your stash. But this guy looks like he needs some heroin. Let's give him a little. We'll wake up happy.
That is the most generous drug user I've ever heard of. Because normally I imagine heroin addicts as being stingy with their stash,
right?
Compared to like pot smokers, but
yeah, no, I was just that was a weird night. And then I told people because I thought it wasn't that weird, and everyone said it was super weird. Everyone's like, "You slept in a fucking park?" I was like, "Yeah, homeless people do it all the time." It's like, "Yeah, they're homeless."
I mean, to me, that's just like the amount of behavior that I prescribe to being a hungry stand-up comedian is wide ranging. Or like just like, oh yeah, that or just like the kind of interactions I have where like normal people would be like, that guy was just a total dick to him. Like, hey, he's a comedian, he's just being funny. I have lots of those kinds of conversations lately. Okay, so you start open mics, and you hustling like multiple open mics, and like, did you ever produce shows?
I produced nothing regular, but I would produce things like here and there, like one-offs. At NYU, I would produce a lot of shows because it was an easy way to create stage time. I would just go to a dorm head, be like, hey, I can get comics from Conan and Comedy Central and MTV. I can get them for free because they'll just treat it like a bar show, because it's not like a big college show. It would be like in the
the auditorium
not even. It would be like in the fucking living, like the whatever the common area was. And
your show, yeah, okay.
Yeah, my shows at NYU I would go to different dorms and say, can I put on a show? I'll get big name comics. It won't cost you anything more than some budget money for snacks. You know, just get us $50 so I can go get you go get some chips and some sodas or pizza. Call it a day. Make sure we have a sound system, and I would get like big comics and like relatively big comics for doing it for free.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. That's what I love about like New York, is that you can that is a possibility that can happen. Like just people that you've seen on TV, if they're are usually up for doing a fun free show.
Yeah.
And working on new stuff. And,
even a not fun free show they're willing to do. It's like and not all those NYU shows were fun, but it would have Phoebe Robinson way long before all that went down. Dan St. Germain's, Sean Donnelly before he was doing every other commercial that's out there. Jamie Lee I would book on as many shows as I could because I thought she was so funny. A lot of comics like that.
Yeah. I remember I ran a show at the Creek for a while, and I always got even doing this, like just the fact that there are people that have done my show that are like doing really, really well now, and have like Suba, I remember when I first met her, like doing those like 3 to 4 mic nights, mic runs, and just seeing that the end goal and it happening to someone who I think is a really good person, I enjoy that. I enjoy that happens.
I do like seeing good people get good stuff and like not just like funny, but like also nice. Like I remember like I hit up JF Harris recently because I saw like him post another picture of like he was opening for Impractical Jokers in front of like probably 2,000-3,000 people, and I just wanted to be like, dude, just like happy for you, because there's not a lot of nice people in comedy. I'm not one of them, and so I appreciate those people who are just nice because when they didn't need to be, and I always remember that, and then I like seeing them get things.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, cool. Because that could go to any funny person. At least it went to a funny person who's also like a decent human.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. So now I'm curious. At what point did you decide you were going to do a podcast?
I had this idea to do something serialized with ex-partners as early as senior year of college because I was already starting to notice this problem that women would hook up with me. None of these women really want to date me, or the women who would like quote unquote date me, they would never call it dating. And then as soon as they started expressing emotions, they would start to run away. It was just starting to become a pattern. And so I kept that in my head. And then after college for a couple years, it was again a pattern. So there was a woman who I met, I forget how, like which site or whatever, or app, but we met, we hit it off. It was crazy strong energy right away.
Yeah.
We had 2 dates, super intense, and we were both like, holy shit, this is like, I'm really, really into you. And I just, is that type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I remember going to my therapist being like, hey, there's this girl, blah, blah, blah. And I talked about the podcast idea because I didn't know if it was a web series or a blog or a podcast or whatever. And so I told my therapist, like, if this one doesn't work out, I'll do that fucking podcast I kept, telling you about. And then like a few weeks later, she went upstate, ran to her ex, they got back together, and I went to therapy and told her. And then the first thing out of my therapist's mouth was, so you're going to do the podcast? And I was like, oh, fuck. So I guess I got to do this. And, I hit up some, I like tested out the idea with some potential guests, like people I've hooked up with. I said, if I did this type of show, would you consider even doing it? Like, because I didn't want to pursue it and like get the stuff. And now I'm going to start booking. And everyone's like, absolutely fucking not. Because if everyone says no, then I don't have a show. It's, I need a decent percentage to say yes.
Right.
But yeah, no, it was like, let's go do this. Because I mean, my problem was that women would sleep with me and they wouldn't date me. And I wanted to find out why. So I figured, why not ask them? Right. And so that's just what I've been doing for the last 5 years is talking to like past partners. Some of them are quick hookups, one night stands. Some of them are people I thought were going to go the distance. Some of them are people I rarely think about. Some of them are prolonged sexual partners that never got serious. And some of them are ex-girlfriends. It's just, I mean, the main reason was because from the age of 19 until I was 26, I didn't have a girlfriend. And I always wanted one.
Right.
And not just to have one, just like whenever things were getting emotional, I would express that and I would say like, this is where I would like this relationship to go. And they would be like, keep your emotions to yourself, come back over and do that thing with your tongue that I like. And I'd be like, okay.
Right.
Sure.
And that's so interesting because
if you're going to use a guy for his body, you think you pick a guy with a better body. That's why I think it's interesting.
Well, the thing is like there's this idea in American popular culture about like that situation you described. I feel like most men, if they found a woman who was just wanted them for their bodies or for sex with no emotional attachments, I feel there's right. That's like the bullshit cliche reaction, right?
Yeah.
But you were looking for like love and commitment and not getting it.
Just to clarify that, when I wanted that from those partners, there were definitely plenty of partners where like
I was
just very happy with it being a sexual thing. But it's just that anytime I wanted to escalate, it was always the woman who told me that we were just gonna fuck, which is it's stereotypically seen as like a woman problem, right? That's like women want a relationship and guys just want to bang. And I'll be like, I kind of want both, but I want love and cuddles and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's always what I wanted too. But if the couple of times a woman was like, if I fuck you, you can't fall in love with me, I've been like, oh, okay.
Well, that's a fucking stupid thing to say. And I've had people say that to me too. I'm like, well, that's just dumb. Like, I can't like promise not to fall in love with you. That's not how it works.
Yeah, the human heart is such a fickle, fickle beast, isn't it?
Yeah, you can say like, hey, if you start falling in love with me, you should like let me know, but so we can end it. But to say, oh, promise, you just have to promise not to fall in love with me. It's like, I can't do that. And like, she also knows that when she says that. That's why I just think it's dumb. You know what I mean?
For me at least, it helped create a very defined boundary, because once that had been established, I would have been like, I find that easier for me to do at least. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, what have you found out about yourself in talking to your ex-partners about why it didn't last or go to that next level?
I'm condescending to younger partners. I'm argumentative, potentially autistic. But I mean, here's the thing: the main running course was just that like there was no singular reason. Like, I do have some negative qualities that like I find out from time to time, or that a particular person didn't like. But overall, it was just like, oh, that just wasn't a fit for me at that time. Mm-hmm. A lot of time, timing was the thing. Like, I'll fall for people who just got out of a big relationship, or they're dating around and they happen to decide to date the other guy or whatever. Also, I'm non-monogamous, so that was always like a little bit of a monkey wrench. I didn't always have the language to communicate all the parts of that, but I did know to say that I did not believe that monogamy was going to be for me. Mm-hmm. Or at least not 100% all the time monogamy. So that, I think, would sometimes drive women to, like, if they had a choice between a couple suitors, maybe bring them the other way. Sometimes I meet people right before they're going to do grad school or move. And sometimes they just weren't that into me. They weren't emotionally into me, and that's fine. So that's the frustrating thing. It's not like there was like, oh, I just got to fix this one thing over here. It's just more like, yeah, it happens.
It's a series of an included series of like external factors that are beyond your control.
Yeah. We have to remember I started the podcast when I was 24 because I was upset I still didn't have a girlfriend. And like, it took like some dude in his 50s one day, like 10 weeks into the podcast, he like says, "Hey dude, let me pull rank on you, but just enjoy it. Just have fun. It'll happen." So like 2 months in, oh, we got the answer. Just let it it'll happen when it happens.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't know. I already bought microphones, so I should keep going.
So gotta keep going. That's one of my favorite Greg Behrendt jokes. He talks about when you get to the point where you don't need anyone, someone will come along and fuck that up with their love.
Can't wait. I can't wait for that day.
And when did you start noticing that like the podcast was like growing? Like, are there specific moments or episodes that you can point to as clear that was a really big moment or that was a really big episode?
There are really big moments in the podcast, but they're not big download moments. The big moments are like outside the podcast draws people in. Like when I was on Guys We Fucked, that like tripled my listenership instantly. When I was in Esquire's top 10 sex podcasts, Snap story on their Snapchat. I don't understand how Snapchat works, but I was in it, and that spiked things. Like is always like press or being on other people's bigger shows, and on rare occasions like a particular guest might have a spike, but it was just always steady growth. Like people were discovering it. I think my people are sex positive weirdos who also like to have fun, because I think a lot of the sex positive content that's out there is great and valuable and informative, but God, they either get like redundant at some point, or they're just super they're always outraged at somebody. They're always ready to be mad, and they're not. So it's not very fun. They take some of the fun out of sex. So I think my people were like, ooh, that's just a little too nerdy for me. And this guy is like a safer zone.
You're fun.
I'm fun, but I think I'm like sex positivity 101. And I like to think that like I can pass you along to much smarter people who will teach you various things about consent and kink and, STIs or whatever.
Sure. Is there a guest that you learned something from that really blew your mind? Like that you didn't know was out there as far as like
the woman in that regards that would be different. But about myself, the woman I lost my virginity to, she blew my mind last year because she said something in it. She said, "I don't think you understood how good looking you were." She's like, "I don't think you got it. I think you thought you were uglier than you were." And that's exactly true. And that explains all my interactions, not just with women, but with myself and around other men. Like, I just, yeah. That was eye-opening for me, for sure.
Wow. That's pretty wild. Because normally I guess I do this to learn more about others, and maybe I learned something about myself along the way. But like your thesis statement was, find out from others about me.
Oh, or about us. It's just more, sometimes it's closure,
Sure. Yeah. It's like catharsis. That's got to be really. That's got to be something that people need.
I think there's a lot of people who they just can relate to either they can relate to me, they can relate to my guests, they can relate to our situation, and there's comfort in that. I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of listeners over the years who took different things from the podcast that have, especially if they live in more sex negative communities or parts of the country, they live in really conservative areas. If they live in the Bible Belt, they'll be like, they think they're the only kinky person in Oklahoma. And I'll be like, I got an email from someone else in your same zip code. You're not the only one. Just we're not all always broadcasting it. So you just don't realize that you're walking amongst like-minded people because you're all afraid of the same shame from your community.
Right.
And I've found that when you put your freak flag out, the freaks will come to you, either publicly or quietly, but they'll come to you. You won't be alone. Like I said, like if you are in Arkansas, if you are in Pocahontas, Arkansas, because I've got a listener in Pocahontas, Arkansas. He's a fucking evangelical pastor, preacher guy, and but he is. He's a Trump supporter. That's a different story. But like he's in this mind where he thinks differently about sex and relationships. And if he would let people know publicly that he thinks that way, more people who think that way will come to him and be like, I think this too. I just didn't think it was safe. So I think a lot of people come to me with that stuff. And what we were talking about earlier about random people opening up to you is that when I'm open about my shitty stuff, people will also open up to me about theirs because they're like, oh, his vulnerability has created this safe zone where I can share stuff.
Yeah, I'm not going to be like hurt by giving this private information.
Yeah, I mean, granted, some people go overboard because they'll just DM me and not introduce themselves and just like assume I know that they listen to the show. Whereas, even though like if you're a Twitter or Instagram follower, it's like, I don't know how you found me. So they'll just start opening up out of nowhere, just say like, oh man, I had this really weird like kink interaction and I don't know how I feel about this. And I'll be like, let's slow down. I appreciate that you want to share. But like first introduce yourself because I am a stranger and you would not go up to a stranger and just start spouting off your relationship difficulties.
Sure.
And then you can ask like, hey, can I ask you something? Because maybe I don't have the bandwidth for that. Maybe I'm not in the mood to give advice or something.
Yeah.
Also because I highly publicize where I give advice. It's my email address. And if you come at me in any other way, I may not be in for it, but yeah, some people go overboard, but it's nice.
And you've interviewed porn stars also on the show. Who I don't want you to get in the realm of playing favorites, but
Nina Hartley. What? It's okay. If Nina Hartley's not your favorite, you're wrong. It's okay.
I was just gonna say I was gonna ask who is the coolest porn star, and I thought the answer might be Nina Hartley. So,
yeah, Nina Hartley also made out with me on air, so that will forever be my favorite.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
What did you talk to her about?
Well, I actually have another episode with her coming out in a couple weeks because we recorded again at AVN. The first one was a bit just more about her and non-monogamy and just her nerding out about sex and poly and all that jazz. And then this time around, the new one is going to talk a bit more about. She was really into this, talking about alpha versus beta guys and the different like uses they can have and things like that, and the strength in being a beta and things of that nature. It's really interesting. So.
That sounds really interesting because I definitely think I definitely have a lot of beta energy, but if you look at me, you'd probably think I feel like most people just look at me and think I'm some like sort of like hulking like
I don't
muscular
think that.
dude, but I'm not.
You've never given off a pinch of alpha energy in whatever many years I've known you.
I've never thought that I have. So.
Yeah, no, you are totally projecting what you feel.
Okay. Good to know. Good.
Also, in that episode, Nina upgrades to offering me a hand job next time I'm in LA. So that will soon be my favorite episode, simply because of that.
I imagine so. And I've seen her in other interviews as well. She's fantastic. I love the kind of like down to earth kind of frankness about her. It's like, yeah, I fuck people.
Yeah,
I just like that.
And
vibe.
she's also so smart. Like she has so much knowledge. And that's another reason just to love everything she says. You can hit record, ask her one question, you can go to the bathroom and she'll come back and you can come back and not say anything. When you listen back to it, it'll all be gold. You know what I mean? Like she's fantastic.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
What's AVN like? I've never been.
It's a blast. But AVN for me is always different because like when I'm there, I'm working.
Sure.
So I mean, I'm probably not as drained as the girls because they're working much harder. But
Yeah.
I mean, last year when I went, I left with 9 episodes. This year I left with 12 or 13. Plus like all the other shit I do, or the shaking of hands, or going to go see friends that like I don't see often, like porn friends and all. So I'm usually working. So like I have some fun, but I mean for me it's really a work trip.
Yeah, that's fun. That's your work trip. It's not just like, hey, Gianna Michaels. Like, no, I'm working, Gianna.
Yeah, or like I'll go walk around and like go see like porn star friends of mine like at their booths, because they're otherwise like sleeping or they have to go to a party afterwards because like that's part of their schedule and yeah. I don't know. So AVN's dope. It's super fun. If you have the opportunity to go to Las Vegas and go to the AVN Awards and the Expo, like it's great. I'm sure if I went and I wasn't working, I'd have a lot more fun.
Sure.
But for me, it's like I'll do 5. I did 5 episodes in a day once, and like just went home and cried after. Because I was just emotional. Because like for me, I'm going and I'm connecting with someone.
Yeah.
And I'm disconnecting. And I'm connecting and I'm disconnecting. And by the end, like I'm just emotionally drained. I compare it to like imagine just going on a bunch of amazing first dates where it's over in an hour and there's no second date. It's really rough. And then I just do 12 of those in 5 days. It takes a toll.
Oh no, I can absolutely understand that.
Yeah.
Like just that amount of mental energy, which I feel like mental exertion is underrated as far as how physically draining it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that, man. Yeah. I'm got a couple questions about like the business side of podcasting because I'm slowly creeping to a point where I feel like I'm gaining some momentum. So I'm curious about your business as far as like monetization and then as far as live events go, how you started doing live events, and do you just do Patreon or do you have sponsors?
I think the order in which I get my monies, Patreon, sponsors, live events, and merch.
And merch, cool.
Yeah, so I do Patreon. I've been doing that for 4 years. I've been doing the podcast for 5 years. I've doing my Patreon for 4. That's been really cool because it's been growing a community. And Patreon talks a lot about like there are support driven patrons who just want to support you and they don't give a fuck about rewards. Then there are benefit driven patrons who they're paying for a thing. They're paying for your art tutorial videos every month. But I think there's a third type that definitely my people fall into that are community driven. And I think they started as support driven when it started, but now at this point there is a community of listeners who are sex positive and like-minded and all over the world. And so they just want to like if you're a bisexual man in his 40s in Mississippi, it's hard to find that even safely because there's a lot of still very legal LGBT discrimination down there, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But so it's nice to know that you can connect with other people who are kind of like you. So I have like a secret Facebook group, and they all get to be in that. And then at $10 a month, I have actually like a Kick group where we just share nudes, gifts, and compliments all day. It's called The Peep Show. I wonder if they have anything fun in there right now. So I've been doing Patreon for a while, and I do bonus episodes on there and a lot of like community building stuff so that when I do the live events, they're really actually excited because they get to go meet each other for the first time. Sometimes. Right now it's just a lot of gifts, not a lot of nudes, but very active. Then I do have sponsors that I just really hustle and work hard to get, and I do a lot of cold emails. And then the live events started a couple years ago when I did Manwhore Con for the first time.
And what was that?
Manwhore Con is a weekend where a bunch of listeners from around the country and Canada, they come to New York City for a weekend. They buy a weekend pass through me, and we do a bunch of really fun events together. So live performances. We do a fan whore pub crawl. We'll do some like fun social events, mixers. We have an after party. There's also we've gone to the Museum of Sex both years, and there's always a live man whore podcast show where I'll be on stage with like 3 or 4 of my exes. So we've done that 2 years. This year is going to be number 3. We got someone coming from Norway, so it has to be good because she bought a plane ticket from Norway. So I feel extra pressure to make sure, like, it was going to be dope, but now I'm like, oh, it fucking better be dope, because, like, Guro, however you say, she's got one of those names that has, like, a symbol that doesn't make sense to me. I was like, she's coming, so I better make it good. Yeah, so it's a really fun weekend. And we do that this year. It's going to be August 2nd through August 4th. And, I just started selling weekend passes, so some of those have sold, and I know people are coming now, so that's great. And
that's cool, man.
Yeah, and then I've also been trying to do some more live shows. So I did like a live show in LA last year, in addition to the Manwhore Con. This year, I'm going to San Francisco and Chicago, and potentially some other cities, depending. Yeah, I'm going to know in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, so kind of like that's determining like your tour schedule as far.
Well, I did like an experimental ticketing model thing. I kind of stole it from the Cake Girls,
Caitlin Bailey and
Carrie,
yeah,
Abby and them. Yeah,
I've had Carrie on and Caitlin on.
So they did something like years ago
on Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, and it was a brilliant idea. The problem was none of them had like. It only works when you have fans in different cities. None of them had it's not like they had this like fan base to like sell it to. So, it didn't work the way they wanted it to, but it was a brilliant idea. And I actually found out that recently that Paul F. Tompkins,
he does the
originally
PFK 300.
Yeah, so he did that like even longer ago. So I had 20 cities for Tour de Manwhore. And when you sold 20 tickets, I sold 20 discounted tickets in these cities. When you sold 20, I activate the city. But the thing is, you don't know the date or the venue,
right?
But if we don't sell 20 tickets in your city, I'm not going to come to your city. So we did that for San Francisco and Chicago. So right now I'm booking a venue, I'm booking guests. So I'm in the process of getting a date locked down for those. And there's 4 other cities that hopefully will still happen. I'm still shooting for Detroit, Philly, Pittsburgh, and DC.
Cool.
DC would be dope because if I do DC, I would want to do like just a panel of sex workers.
Oh yeah,
like right there, and then it's just get as close to the Capitol as possible, and then just like get a bunch of fucking whores up there with me and be like, let's talk Sesta Fosta, let's talk weird Congress people stories if you're comfortable. Let's have a conversation because that's where they're passing all the shitty anti-sex worker legislation, and people are dying, and let's make sure people know the faces of these women that's affecting, mostly women.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Caitlin Bailey is like very active in that fight also, and I think it needs to. It is something that like the response to it far outweighs what is actually being done. Like I've never been to a sex worker, but I don't think it should be illegal.
Yeah. So that's what I would want to do if I did DC. So live shows is something I'm trying to do this year more of.
Yeah, the DC show would be fun. I started in comedy in Baltimore, so I know lots of the DC guys and girls also. So yeah, that's a great comedy town, great like live show town.
Yeah, but Detroit, right now Detroit only needs to sell 5 more tickets. I had no idea that I would get any traction in Detroit. And then obviously like after I book the show, then like I'll sell full price tickets for the thing. So it's not like I'm just having 20 people.
Yeah. And then
I just want to know that. I just don't want to lose, thousands of dollars booking a tour and then like it not go well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a brilliant example of the way that there's this faction of the live entertainment business that is opening up to more niche, but people are able to make a living, and it's more cost effective because you know what your risk versus your reward is, and then it's not like it's not like my early days of trying to like book my one-man show, and just thinking, well, we'll set up posters, see if anyone shows up, and then just wait, and then oh, no one came. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go cry into this General Tso's chicken.
And like emotions aside, I just can't I'm just not in a financial position where I can afford to like travel a bunch. So I was like, oh, if I sell $200 plus like a sponsor, I can at least like probably break even on a show, or at least it won't be like a devastating. And I always release these as an episode on the podcast. So like,
Sure.
my LA live show like didn't go so well turnout wise, but the content, like the show itself, was fantastic. So it ended up I think I ended up losing $25. So I'm like, okay. I spent $25 to get a really, really cool show where I got some professional photos of me on stage with some really cute women. Mm-hmm. And I got a really great podcast episode out of it. Yeah, I'm good. And I got to shake hands with some listeners. Like, that's great. Fantastic. Yeah. So I want to be able to do that in more cities.
Yeah, sounds like a successful night.
Yeah.
So like, where can people find your stuff so that we can get those extra tickets sold and people can support the podcast?
Sure. The Manwhore Podcast. I'm not sure. I don't think we ever actually said the name. Yeah. So it's called the Manwhore Podcast.
We might have, but we didn't focus on it too much.
Yeah. So the Manwhore Podcast you can find anywhere you're listening to this podcast except SoundCloud, because that's not a real podcast place. It's not. Just search Manwhore. That's one word, and you'll find me. You can find me on Twitter at the Billy Procida. That's Procida. And worst case scenario, just go to manwhorepod.com. That'll get you to everything.
Cool, man. Well, congrats on your success, and I hope you get to do some more live shows this year. It was great to sit down and talk with you again. I know we know of each other,
sure,
but I feel like this was a nice chat. And
now we know each other a little better.
Yeah, man. So great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I'll congratulate you on your future hand job from Nina Hartley now.
I can't wait.
Thanks, Billy. Okay, folks, that's the show for the week. Thank you for listening. Again, you can listen to Billy's podcast, Manwhore, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to get tickets for upcoming dates, you can get at Billy on Twitter. And I am, of course, on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can follow the podcast at AwesomeDPod, and you can subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher. You can add us to your faves playlist. I would greatly appreciate it. I hope you have a great week. Whatever you're going to do, I hope you do it to the best of your ability. And if you're not doing something you love, I hope you got something that's keeping you going. Because sometimes you just need something like that. And this is that for me. So I love doing this show, and I really appreciate that you guys listen. So thank you for being here, and I will see you folks next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.